Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, October 30th, Sunday, October 30th, 2022, and we are live. All right. On the line, we're joined by Marnese Jackson, who is with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, and she's here to talk about their 2022 Equity Summit, their 2022 Equity Summit that is taking place Wednesday, November 2nd through Friday, November 4th, and it is a virtual summit. Welcome back to the African History Network show. Marnese Jackson, how you doing today, Marnese?
Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm all right. Better now that I'm talking to you, Marnese. But hey, it's going all right. This is it's going all right. It's a hot show. I wanted to have you on because what you're doing is fantastic, and oftentimes I think when it comes to in the environment and understanding environmental issues, I think over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, people are learning more about how it impacts African Americans. But for a long time, environmental issues were just associated with white people, so to speak, okay, oftentimes. But I think now more people with climate change and hurricanes hitting with more frequency, like in places like Florida and hitting in southern states, Georgia, etc. So give us some background information on the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. What do you all do, and what's your position with them?
Thank you so much, Michael, and thanks for having me here at the African History Network.
You're welcome, Marnese.
So the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition was founded in 2019 to play a leadership role convening stakeholders and allies around the regional decarbonization strategy. And so what that means is within this 8-state region across the region of Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, and Wisconsin, I co-direct this coalition alongside with my other two co-directors, Margaret Hendrick and Jacob Surfling. They are in 2 different states as well.
Okay.
The focus is to take on climate change as it relates to the building sector. So we spend the majority of our time in homes, 90%. And when we are faced with cold climates, we end up facing the most pollutant outcomes within our homes. So that means
what type of outcome?
Where we go to work, where we go to school.
Marnese, what type of outcome did you say? You said, did you say prudent outcome? What type of outcome?
So due to the climate change issues, and for those who are not familiar with climate change, those it's caused by these harmful emissions that's going up in the air due to CO2 emissions.
Okay.
So that can come by way of methane gas, CO2 emissions. The things that we love so much, that we need so much, is harming us. And so we're going to start seeing more disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes. We know we just seen Hurricane Ian. We know the historic Hurricane Katrina. So we're going to start seeing more storms like that. Now, as this relates to us, when we start to see more storms like that, we're going to experience here in Michigan, because we're in Michigan, where I'm at right now, we're going to experience the tornadoes, more drought, things of that nature. And so what does this have to do with buildings? Because where we eat, where we live, where we go to school, we go to work, we have to generate our energy. And you have different sources by way you can do that, through electricity, and also we have to heat our homes. And in Michigan specifically, we heat our homes by way of gas. And so the best way to mitigate climate change is to have cleaner options like wind, solar, geothermal, and access to energy efficiency, which will lower your utility rates.
Okay.
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so why the building sector is important, because when you're in your home 90% of the time, you are ingesting these harmful particles like those CO2 emissions that I mentioned that may come from your appliance. So if you're not switching to more electrical appliances, you either may have a gas stove. And so maybe you have gas appliances, which means that you're consuming methane gas, which causes upper respiratory diseases like asthma, bronchitis, and things of that nature. On top of that, it also causes high utility rates. And so for those who may not be familiar with that, DTE Energy or Consumers Energy are two most popular utility providers within the Southeast Michigan area, which is predominantly Black, Brown communities and low-income communities. And so they do not provide us access to cleaner energy options, the ones that are listed. And so that means when you don't have cleaner energy options, then you may experience economic issues, health issues, and of course, there's that racial justice lens with that.
Okay, so you mentioned bronchitis, asthma, a couple of other illnesses. What were the other illnesses that you mentioned?
Well, upper respiratory, those are like the main two.
Upper respiratory. Okay, so upper respiratory illnesses and a larger amount of cases of upper respiratory illnesses that is associated with climate change and problems in the environment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and this disproportionately negatively impacts African Americans.
Yes. As we all know that when America gets a cold, Black people, we get pneumonia.
Right.
And so this is true in the same regard of our utility rates, environmental issues. And when we're thinking about the environment, we're thinking about anything like lead in our water, which we all seen in Flint, Detroit, and it's still happening. But then also in the building sector, which we don't focus much on because, even those issues are very important. Right. We're just not really starting to pay more attention to the building sector. These issues are just as important because during the pandemic, we all know we were indoors and we saw a large rate of asthma cases, not just due to the pandemic, but also due to us being indoors all the time because we had to, right? And so there's definitely a correlation between the housing, redlining, because a lot of us live in older housing, which means we may not have an energy efficient home like the ones that we see are getting built in suburbs or just newly built in communities. And so with a lot of us in these Black and Brown communities, we still live in these older houses which have not been upgraded. The buildings are pretty much out of code, which also causes the economic issues.
So what we're looking at, dealing with climate change and the environment, dealing with it could be health issues that pertain to the African American community, as well as economic issues, which causes us to spend more on our energy bill.
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, like I said, I was talking about DTE Energy, and I was talking about consumers. These two utility companies, because we're like in this area, they dictate where our energy comes from. So right now, it's either oil or gas. And if we, as advocates, communities don't look at where our energy comes from or the different options of other options that you may not be privy to, then we're going to end up having a health risk, an economic risk, and this is definitely predominantly in Black and Brown communities. And so DTE Energy is most likely will be having another rate increase, and you probably wonder why. Why am I having this, and shouldn't I be able to dictate where my energy comes from? Right. And so you don't know about this because a lot of this is not made public.
Right.
But we do, and this is where the importance of getting out to vote, because DTE is regulated by the Public Service Commission, which is an appointed position by the governor. And so these commissioners are appointed.
Appointed is a position appointed by the governor. Go ahead. We're coming up on a break in 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Yes. So they're appointed by the governor, and they decide whether or not they want to hold DTE Energy consumers and any other utility company in Michigan accountable. So there's a whole process to intervene. And intervening in a case is pretty much a lawsuit in a rate case. Mm-hmm. So a rate case is just where they decide, it's like this year, like a whole, like maybe 10-year plan to decide if they're going to put in a new gas pipeline or oil pipeline, or if they decide to have more clean energy options. Right. And most of the time, these plans, they do not have clean energy options.
Okay. We're coming up on a break. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition's 2022 Equity Summit taking place November 2nd through the 4th, 2022. I will be speaking there on Wednesday and Friday. And Marnese Jackson will be there also. It's a virtual summit. All right, stand by, Marnese. Okay, you listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, October 30th, 2022, and we are speaking with Ms. Marnese Jackson, who is with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, and she is informing us about climate change, how climate change impacts the African American community, and she's going to give us some information about their 2022 Equity Summit, that's coming up Wednesday, November 2nd through Friday, November 4th, 2022. It's a virtual summit, so you can watch from around the world. And I will be speaking there also on Wednesday and Friday, and Marnese will be speaking as well. So, Marnese, okay, so welcome back. And let people know what your position is with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, please.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So at the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, I and I manage the equity engagement. And so with this year's summit, we're focusing on self-determination, Kwanzaa Kuji-Changalia, excuse me for mispronouncing.
Kuji-Changalia? Yes.
Yes. I just can't talk well. That's just me. And so we're focusing on self-determination because we want communities to really empower themselves to take on policies like the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yes.
And so with this Equity Summit, we're going to be focusing on topics like reparations, land back, because building decarbonization is talking about the built environment and not perpetuating the same harms that communities of color have experienced due to white supremacy culture. We talked a lot about the process of how you're going to can get engaged, of course, what building decarbonization is. Might be more important right now to get involved with this, especially in regards to the Inflation Reduction Act that was just passed, and then also the implementation, because there's an opportunity to look into the green economy for new jobs, opportunity for contractors, opportunity for new job creation. And then also we're going to be talking about those topics that we just don't want to talk about. Like I said, white supremacy culture, racism, and how it relates to the movement. Because with climate change, we're going to still see these storms, right? We're going to still see climate impacts happening. So communities have to become more resilient, but then also we have to switch our thinking to liberation thinking, right, of what does a energy sovereign society looks like. How do we dictate where our energy comes from? Because where we power our electricity and heat is causing climate change by way of these greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions. So you have to go back to biology class to understand all that. Either way it goes, all this is hurting our communities, right? And we, like I said before, with these two storms happening all the time and frequently, and like I think in the fall we just had a couple days, Detroit residents experienced maybe 2 to 3 days of shutoffs because of a storm we had, and residents only received like a $25 voucher if you lost like a quarter of your groceries and things of that nature. And we all know the inflation right now, the groceries, you're going to pay at least $400 for some groceries per household. So things like that, we talk about aligning what does reparations look like when things like that happen, because if you had a reliable grid with clean energy, i.e. solar or wind, we wouldn't be worrying about that. So we're going to be dispelling the false narrative. Then we're talking about how communities can really start to engage more communities in this, because quite frankly, these are community conversations. These are impacting our lives economically and, of course, health, right?
Right.
So these are topics that we're going to be lifting up.
Okay, give people the website so they can register for this conference. And how much does it cost for people to attend this virtual conference?
So guess what? It is free.
It's free.
And it's
you're gonna get all this. You're gonna get all this for free. And Michael Imhotep is speaking as well on 2 days. You're gonna get all this for free.
Yes. Yes, you get it for free. Just log on to Zoom, and you can register. And MidwestDecarb.org. We have a lot of great speakers. We have
give the website, Marnese. Give the website again and speak slowly, please.
Okay, MidwestDecarb.org/summit.
Okay, MidwestDecarb.org/summit. We have it up here on the screen. Yep. You can go there. You can register for the conference. They also have a full schedule of the conference. Go ahead and continue, Marnese, please.
So we're going to have some awesome speakers. Like I said, Brother Michael Imhotep. We have Swartos Olatin. She is a pioneer in the environmental and climate justice movement. We have Dr. Harvell from Henry Ford Community College. We have Isaiah Zeke Williams from New Era, Detroit. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of community organizers who will be a part of the panels. We definitely know we talk about hot topics, like I said, reparations, where we at with that, land back initiatives, aligning African Americans with Indigenous, like how we can support each other, because it's time out for Oppression Olympics.
Right.
And also it's time for us to be really supporting each other. And also, we'll be talking about regulatory. What does that mean to get involved within the regulatory? And yes, we know that this is very technical, but we want people. We're going to definitely be meeting people where we are. That's why we centered the topics around self-determination.
Okay. Now, explain. We're coming up on a break in a couple minutes, and if you got a few more minutes, I'm gonna hold you over the break, because I want to hone in on this. The Inflation Reduction Act. You mentioned that, and I know you are bipartisan, but on this show we're not, and this is my show. So just so people know, the Inflation Reduction Act, no Republicans in the House or the Senate voted for the bill. Okay, just so people understand this. But explain explain how the Inflation Reduction Act will help African Americans and communities of color.
Okay. The Inflation Reduction Act, of course, is very landmark, and it's to curb the reducing deficit by lowering, of course, prescription drugs, oh my goodness, and investing into domestic energy production while promoting clean energy. Mm-hmm. So this is what the building decarbonization is about. We want clean energy options.
Right.
and that is sustainable, right?
Right.
We
Okay.
want wind, hydroelectric power,
hold it
solar,
right there, Marnese.
geothermal, and energy efficiency.
Marnese, we're coming up on the break. Hold it right there. We're going to pick this up on the other side of the break. Marnese Jackson is explaining to us what the Inflation Reduction Act is and how it's going to help African Americans and communities of color. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, we are speaking with Marnese Jackson with the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, and she is giving us information about their 2022 Equity Summit, as well as how climate change negatively impacts the African American community. And right before the break, she was explaining to us the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act that recently passed in the House and the Senate and was signed into law by President Biden. And she was talking about how the Inflation Reduction Act provisions in it that will help the African American community. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about at the conference as well. So, Marnese, thanks for coming back for this segment. Go ahead and finish your thoughts dealing with the Inflation Reduction
Act. Okay, thanks so much. So, with the Inflation Reduction Act signed by President Biden, so there's the healthcare insurance premium and coverage will definitely help African Americans. But in regards to combating climate change and lowering energy costs, the Inflation Reduction Act takes the most aggressive action on climate and clean energy in American history. So the legislation will bring down energy costs for Black families and create thousands of good jobs. And while reducing climate pollution, it will also secure energy supply as well. So make home energy upgrades more affordable. You can replace air conditioners, water heaters, or furnaces, and you can save up pretty much to 30% with tax credits for efficient heating and cooling equipment. Households can save up to 30% with tax credits for home construction projects. So this is an opportunity to expand contractors and construction jobs. And definitely this is lacking within the Black community because we're only representing 1% within the energy job sector. And so construction projects can mean windows, door installation, or weatherization projects. Families can replace or upgrade stoves, right? I'm talking about those gas stoves and other home appliances.
Right. And
they can get direct rebates by buying more energy and electric appliances. Families in affordable housing units, for example, could boost their energy efficiency and improve their indoor air quality, which will also make our communities more climate resilient. And then families could save more than, I believe they said, $1,000 per year on energy tax credits.
Okay, yeah, because I know there are commercials running now that talk about the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act, and I know it'll reduce, I think it's maybe about $1,800 a year in savings when it comes to energy for families. So it's going to do a lot. There is a good article from Axios.com, and this is in the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition's Facebook page. There's a good article that they have from Axios.com called, and I have it up here on the screen for those that are watching on Facebook and YouTube, The Unequal Toll of Climate Disasters. The Unequal Toll of Climate Disasters. September 21st, 2022, this article came out. And in the article, it talked about the big picture, Black and Latino communities in the U.S. have long been burdened by the disproportionate impacts of climate change. Okay. And it goes on to say, it talks about 5 years after the devastation of Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico was reeling from Hurricane Fiona, which unleashed heavy rains, winds, and mudslides on the island and left most households without electricity or access to running water. And then it goes on to talk. It says, for starters, community of color are less likely to receive disaster relief aid, especially when compared to white affluent households in the communities they live in, according to FEMA's 2020 National Advisory Council report. Then the article goes on to talk about hurricanes leave lasting scars by disrupting public health and healthcare delivery. Hospitals shut down and patients' care is halted by power outages. So give us some more information here, because a lot of times, once again, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to address a lot of these issues and address climate change. This is the largest investment when it comes to fighting against climate change in the history of this country. Okay, so talk some more about how climate change, how the Inflation Reduction Act will help with this, and how climate change impacts African Americans. And these are some of the things we're going to discuss at the conference as well.
Yes. And so the impact on African, Latinx, Indigenous, low-income communities, the impacts are just that. With not having running water, of course, if your house is getting flooded, you got to, of course, do everything over, but then there's not adequate flood insurance, and sometimes that's not even covered in insurances. Mm-hmm. But then also the displacement that people don't like to lift up. We've seen this where residents have to go to different states. They may actually have to live there for like years, months, and then of course there's the new culture to moving into a different city, a different state. And we saw that within Hurricane Katrina, the narrative of New Orleans residents moving to Houston. Some did well, but then, however, some did not adjust very well. But then when they come back to their communities, they see a lot of different changes with rising costs of housing,
right.
Gentrification, for example.
Yes.
Gentrification, but then also it's a setup for an emergency management system.
Right.
And then it's also, as we see within the case study of New Orleans, students didn't return back to a public school system. Most of them returned back to a charter school system. And so we all know they may not experience quality education, right? And so those are the aftermaths, not to mention the emotional shocks, right? The spiritual, the mental health. I don't know if we all seen the video or the documentary, Hurricane Katrina. It came on HBO, like the children of Hurricane Katrina, the mental health that came along with all that. And so within this Inflation Reduction Act, of course, we can't mitigate all those issues, right? Because these are going to continue to happen if we don't aggressively switch to clean energy, have different practices personally. But in the Inflation Reduction Act, upgrading to affordable housing to enforce homes against climate impacts, right? To increase water and energy efficiency, and then also expanding urban and community programs like with tree planting projects, right? People think it's okay to cut the trees. No, we need to plant trees that will help cool neighborhoods with a priority for projects that benefit underserved communities. Advancing transportation equity and resilience with the neighborhood access and equity programs. And so this is important because when these disasters happen, to get out of the cities or the state's transportation or mass transportation, it may not be accessible. And so improving programs like walking, protect against energy or extreme heat or flooding impacts. So projects like those, and then also expansion into lower costs for small businesses. So small business can receive tax credits that cover 30% of switching over to lower cost solar power. And then also smaller business can deduct up to like 1.1 per square foot of their business for making high energy or efficiency upgrades. So this is how good a decarb relates to climate change and the Inflation Reduction Act. And not to mention good paying jobs, right?
Exactly.
And so another thing we're going to be talking about, another thing we will be talking about is workforce development.
Okay. Workforce development.
How the barriers of workforce development,
okay.
like with our returning citizens, right?
Yes.
This is an equity issue because we know that returning citizens may not have access to jobs. So we're trying to eliminate a lot of barriers, with background checks and things of that nature when we're thinking about the policies that are going to be coming down. Because if they can't get access to the jobs that they want, this is a new gateway for them to get new jobs within this new clean energy sector.
Okay. So the website, once again, everybody, is Midwest Decarb, DECARB, MidwestDecarb.org/summit, SUMMIT. And I'm speaking on Wednesday and Friday. I'm on a panel. Marnese asked me to be a part of this fantastic conference. This is a powerful, powerful conference. And before you go, Marnese, so on Wednesday, November 2nd, 3 p.m. to 3:50 p.m. or 4 p.m., something like that, advancing reparations and building decarbonization. This is one of the panel discussions I'm on. And this is when you go to the website, everybody, you click on full schedule, you'll see it. You'll see the information. You see the picture of me here. Give us one synopsis of what this panel discussion will be about. And it's moderated, it's facilitated by Marnese Jackson as well, who we have with us today. Give us some 1 minute synopsis of what this panel will be about.
Okay, so reparations, we want reparations, like when energy or climate impacts happen, to be in the form of reparations.
Okay.
So if your life gets shut off due to DTE, they should pay the cost because they did not give us clean energy options, right? Mm-hmm. They should not be sending you a $25 check and you pay $400 for groceries. No.
You said, well, how much was the check? You said if they send how much of a check?
They said, my friend, $25. And she was like, no, I just paid $400 and some for these groceries.
Who was that?
I said, this is a good time. My friend, Maria.
Okay, your friend. Okay, Maria. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this session is definitely going to focus on tangible because, there's some conversation about what does reparations look like.
Right.
Could it be in the form of a check? Could it be education, student loan relief? This is a way for us to make things more tangible, but then also what does accountability look like, right? Mm-hmm. And if you think about accountability, environmental, climate, energy impacts, we can think about the Flint water crisis. They should be paid reparations, okay?
Right.
For example.
Right.
So when these things happen, we want to make sure that we're aligning these efforts with reparations. Something tangible to hold our government accountable for these atrocities that's going to happen.
Okay.
Since they say they are for the people, right?
Okay.
So this conversation will give us a history about it, but then it will also talk about how we align it with energy sovereignty.
Okay, everybody, it is Wednesday, November 2nd through Friday, November 4th, 2022. It is free. You can attend this, register online, virtual summit, MidwestDecarb.org/summit. We'll put a link on our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Marnese Chris Jackson, I'll do anything for you. Thanks for inviting me to speak at this conference, and we'll talk to you next time, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me, and I'll see you Wednesday.
All right. See you Wednesday. Have a great night. Okay, everybody, we'll be back in a few minutes. We'll go back to Kanye West. Then we're going to talk about midterm elections as well. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep.